Hello everyone, so I'm here today to talk to you and share some gardening and plant propagation techniques. In this video I'll discuss cuttings. So cuttings simply involve taking a piece of a plant, whether it's a stem, a leaf or sometimes a root. You cut and separate it from the plant to encourage new roots and create more plants. We'll see that there are plenty of different ways to do it. Depending on the season, the plant and the techniques you want to use, there are quite a few. We'll also look at the advantages, the different benefits this technique, this practice can bring, and we'll also look at a few drawbacks. There are some. Next, we'll look at the equipment, what we need to do this properly. And then after that I'll really show you on a practical level how it works, and I'll also share a few little tips to make it work a bit better. First of all, in terms of advantages, cuttings allow you to preserve the qualities of a plant. If a plant has a certain shape, a certain aroma, flowers with a certain color that you want to keep, cuttings guarantee a clone, so you'll retain the same qualities. Unlike with sowing, when you sow seeds, you get lots of seeds from the plant. You'll have a population where individuals each have somewhat different traits, different scents, not always the same shape. With cuttings, at least, you can be sure to really preserve exactly the traits and characteristics of the mother plant. And so, as a result, it also allows you to propagate a plant that you wouldn't be able to produce seeds from. I have some plants like verbenas and some sages that bloom and look nice, but they don't produce seeds, or when they do, the seeds aren't viable. In those cases, taking a cutting at least lets you propagate the plant. It also helps. You're out for a walk or going on a trip or vacation, and you come across a plant you'd like to have at home, but it doesn't have any seeds, so there's no way to collect seeds from it. In that case, just cut a piece of stem at home. Be cautious about cutting stems from plants that aren't yours, especially in public or botanical gardens. It's not always allowed. And then another last advantage I see now is if you have a plant that's sick, there's a problem with the roots, the plant starts to die, you can cut pieces of the stems before the plant completely dies. That way it can grow new healthy roots. That way save a plant. So it's always better to take cuttings from a healthy, vigorous plant that's doing well, but in some cases taking cuttings can also help save a plant that's not doing well. As for the drawbacks, there aren't that many. There really aren't that many. We can come back to what we were saying earlier. If we can't produce seeds, we can take cuttings to keep the same characteristics, which is the advantage. But then if we take cuttings, all the plants will be exactly the same. They'll be clones. And so the downside is, if you want to grow fruits or vegetables at home and you only take cuttings from your plants, you'll have all the same resistance to diseases and pests, and if a disease or pest shows up, well, it can wipe out all your plants because they're clones and they all have the same resistance, so they'll be sensitive in exactly the same way. So here it's not really an advantage. A disadvantage could be the technical aspect. Not everyone necessarily knows how to do this. For some plants it's not always easy. We'll see. In this video I share techniques that work almost every time. They still work well. For some plants it's unnecessary and can be very easy. I think of things like papyrus, cutting a leaf, putting it in water, letting it grow roots. It works. There are other plants for which it can be quite technical because of hygiene concerns and difficulty maintaining proper humidity. That's the technical side, which can sometimes hold you back. I hope that by the end of this video you'll see that it's not that complicated after all. Oh, and yes, one more thing. One last drawback is the amount of plants you'll be able to produce. Comparing to sowing, we collect seeds from a plant and then plant them. Planting in rows or broadcasting lets you grow hundreds of plants compared to the effort of getting hundreds of cuttings. It's gonna take time, so the time to do each stem, it's not like sowing seeds broadcast. So that's how much time it can take, and the number of plants you'll end up with will often be less than with sowing. I'll now show you some of the equipment I use. You don't have to have all of this. So I'll say it again, here I'm really just sharing with you to have the most advanced techniques as clean as possible. For plants that are really difficult to propagate, for some you won't need this. For many plants, a pair of scissors is enough, so we'll start with the equipment. Scissors, so pruning shears. When it's thick stems that need to be cut, knife, scalpel, razor blade, whatever you choose, always use the sharpest blade possible. That goes for all tools, and the sharpest tools possible. It'll always be better. The knife is mainly for making the final cut. We'll see this during practice. It's good to have the sharpest blades possible, and also it's always best to have the cleanest equipment possible. So I use alcohol C. What did I buy here? I found 70% alcohol at the pharmacy. There you go, any type of alcohol. Anyway, it works. I see some people use a lighter. That also works to really disinfect it. The spray is still pretty effective every time we work. Especially if you're taking cuttings from multiple plants. We're going to take cuttings from this plant using clean, disinfected tools and cut a few stems. Once we're done with this plant and move on to a new one, especially if it's the same species and variety, which isn't the case here, between each plant, a quick wipe, we disinfect, a quick wipe on the blades, and there you go. That way we can keep things clean, where we avoid bringing in or spreading disease between plants. Often you'll see this when taking cuttings from fragile plants. It happens that the roots don't come quickly, that they take time to root, and then the stem ends up rotting. So that can happen because the soil isn't clean, or our hands aren't clean, or the tools aren't clean. If everything is well cleaned, everything is spotless, normally there's less rot, and as a result, you have fewer failures. So here, I'm doing it on a wooden board. They're not the easiest to clean. It's not the most sterile equipment you'll have. That's it, you'll see. Afterwards, if you have plants that really don't do well, maybe use a glass board or a board that you can clean better. And then really thorough hygiene. And I listed the equipment, we disinfect the scissors, knives, and everything. The hands too, you can spray a bit of hop on your hands just to make sure your hands are really clean. Of course, we wash our hands beforehand. If I'm saying all this, it's really important, so I'll repeat it once again. For some plants, they're very delicate. It's actually like surgery. When you cut a stem, it's like performing surgery on someone. We expose tissues, we expose internal tissues. That's when diseases and fungi can appear very quickly. For some plants, it's crucial to be very clean. Then once the cuttings are done, we'll need to put them in a greenhouse. A rich humidity with the highest possible humidity level. So for example, I have mini greenhouses like this, which you can find at garden centers. You can find them pretty much everywhere. You can still make your own. A small greenhouse with glass, plexiglass, plastic, anything, so it's still plastic, I don't know. It's like that for everything we do here. I realize that I am often faced with this problem. We use a lot of plastic, so yeah, I'm working on it. I'm trying to reduce it as much as possible. For now it's not great, something else we might have. But it's still plastic. It's plastic bottles like this that you cut. You can use the bottom part for soil and place this on top to retain moisture. Or you can use a slightly bigger pot with your soil inside. Your cutting here and your plastic on top to make... Here you go, make a mini greenhouse on top. Lastly, use the substrate, the medium for your plants. Some cuttings are easy. You just put them in water, let them grow roots, then plant them in soil. I still use potting soil because it's better for the roots. When they emerge, they quickly find food in the potting soil and breathe better there since they can't breathe in water. I use seedling potting soil just like I do for seedlings for the same reason. When starting seedlings, we place seeds side by side and use very fine potting soil. This way, when we transplant later, we can separate the roots and prevent them from getting tangled. Here I have a potting soil, there are fibers in it, so we're going to use a seedling soil which will be similar to this one, very fine, with little fiber because of how we make our cuttings. I usually make several and place them side by side. After rooting, we separate them. If the soil is very fine, it's easier to separate the roots than with soil that's too fibrous. Here are the materials to use. We'll start now. So with the actual cuttings, we'll see that there are several types of cuttings. Here we'll try to go into a bit more detail about stem cuttings. Simple reverse, summer and semi-hardwood cuttings. Let's take a closer look at that. Later I'll discuss other types of cuttings. I might cover them in separate videos to keep this one short. So when we talk about reverse cuttings, these are cuttings that are done before summer, or at least on young shoots. So here I have a basil plant. When it's reverse, it's the stem at the tip which is still green, which hasn't turned woody yet, which isn't brown yet. As you can see lower down, the other type of cutting will be the semi-hardwood cutting, or on semi-hardwood. So here is the other one, the one that's on the wood, a bit more lignified. Each is done at a different time. Reverse cuttings can be done until summer, and semi-hardwood cuttings can be done from summer until later. Some plants last into autumn and winter. Blackcurrant and redcurrant are propagated from woody stems in winter after they've lost all their leaves. So there you go. It's not necessarily because it's called Aute that it belongs to the month of August. You can take cuttings from mature wood before August. But it just means that the wood is woody, tinted, and has more lignin in it. The advantages and disadvantages of each of these types of cuttings. Using softwood cuttings which are still fresh makes it pretty simple. The downside is that it's going to be a stem that will rot more easily. However, because the wood is thin, the roots will emerge much faster. However, if you use matured wood, the result will be the opposite. It will rot less quickly because the wood is already woody. On the other hand, the roots will take more time to grow. So it can balance out. There are quite a few plants. What I used to do on matured wood, for example, the vervins, I waited for summer. I had a bit more time. I did it on matured wood. My success rate was around 40–50%, so I failed several times. One day I thought, I'll try it on green wood, since the plants on mature wood were already rotting easily. I thought it was going to rot even more. It rotted less, and the roots grew very, very quickly. It happened especially during a period when the plant was in full growth, so it rooted very fast. So, do it on your side. For some plants, it will be better on hardwood. For others, it will be better on green wood. There are no rules here. With your techniques, methods, equipment, and preferences, anything can work. Other methods include leaf or root cuttings. For some plants, simply breaking off a piece of leaf works. That's a lot for mainly succulent plants. There are crassulas that work like that, and there are porcelain plants that work like that too. Root cuttings are more for comfrey, where you take pieces of root and put them in the ground, and it grows very, very easily. I'll explain stem cuttings in more detail. First, let's identify them. A fairly long piece of stem without too many branches going in all directions. No flowers. For plants with flowers like this basil, avoid taking cuttings from the flowering parts. If we take a stem with a flower, we remove the flower. For me, it's something I like to say. A plant is a bit like a man. It can't do two things at once. A plant that's flowering can't make roots at the same time. A plant that's sick can't make roots either. It must heal and recover before taking root. If there are flowers, we remove them. We'll identify a stem section with several nodes. The length can be around 20 centimeters, but I'll use a bit less. You don't need that much. The idea is to have several nodes. I'm going to cut here. So the nodes, that's where the leaves attach. So the stem where there are no buds, and the nodes where there are buds and leaves. Usually buds appear at the base and inside the leaf. So 20 centimeters is to have several nodes. The idea is that once the cutting is done, we'll be able to bury it. Place 1 to 3 nodes in the soil depending on the spacing. So we identify the part we want to keep. Cut 2, 3 or 4 nodes by using the pruner mid-stem, avoiding cuts too close to a node. Cut slightly below the desired final line, as we'll make the last cut with the knife later. Here the pruner is used to cut a stem, keeping several internodes. I have a good stem here. If the stem is vigorous with buds and steady growth along it, you can see it's especially vigorous at the end. I sometimes cut off the tip. For example, here I'll remove it so it doesn't draw too much, so it doesn't want to grow too much and suck up water through the stem. Here I'm going to roughly mark it out. This is the part I want to keep. I'll cut below this node to leave a stem just under 20 centimeters long. I'm going to remove all the bottom leaves, since this part will be buried in the soil. Up to here, one more level, and from here I'm not going to cut all the leaves. I'll leave a few, but I'll cut a good part like this to leave just a little bit. Growth began here for the parts that have started to develop. There I cut a little bit. And so here what I like to do, this is a little trick I've had for a while. All the little pieces of leaves, all the small leaves that have already started, I cut them in half. I remove them, I don't keep any whole leaves. So now I'll explain to you why you need to remove such a large part of the leaves like this. It's not complicated. Once you understand this, you'll see for other cuttings, you'll have this logic. How does a plant work? Now, underground there are the roots, which are there to absorb water and the minerals it contains. It travels up the stem and leaves for photosynthesis, but how does the plant make the sap rise? There are several things, but especially evaporation, evapotranspiration. So through the leaves evaporate water, and it's a bit like a straw. If you suck at the top, it raises the water at the bottom. They release water from their leaves, which pulls water up from the roots. If we left all the leaves, they'd keep evaporating water and drawing it up, but not through the roots since they're gone. That would cause water to enter and flow directly into the stem. It rots, and that's not good. So that's why we remove a large part of the leaves, and that's also why afterwards we're going to put them in a mini greenhouse. Once that's done, so that the air around the plant is saturated with humidity. It's kind of like being in tropical countries if you've ever been. With a huge humidity level in the air, you don't sweat anymore. You're instantly clammy when you arrive because the air is so humid you can't sweat, you just stay clammy. It's going to be the same in the mini greenhouse. Once it's saturated with humidity in the greenhouse, the leaves won't be able to evaporate anymore. First, we'll have removed a large part of the leaves, and the few we've left won't be able to evaporate water anymore. And as a result, they won't draw water up through the stem. We'll leave it like that for a while. And then once it might have started to grow roots little by little, we can start to open the greenhouse. That's why we must remove it all. And once we have this piece of stem prepared, well, we can go ahead and cut below a node and a slant cut. So why a slant cut? I've answered this question several times, but I'm not. One thing that convinced me is if it's cut at a slant, it increases surface area, which is often where roots emerge. Cutting at a slant helps the plant root better and prevents stem damage when planting. There you go. There may be other reasons, but cutting at a slant simply works better. So here with a knife, you don't just cut straight through like that. It shouldn't make a noise when you cut. You shear, you don't crush. So it's going to be one motion with the knife like this to get the cleanest, neatest cut possible. There you go. Once that's ready, we're going to plant it in the ground. So here it's going to be a bit like what I do for seedlings too. I fill my pot with soil without packing it down. That's it. I just lightly press the surface like this just by tapping it, but you definitely don't want to crush the soil. The goal is for the soil to be as airy as possible. So the roots struggle less, can breathe better, and there's air in the soil. Oh yes, don't forget, once the pot is ready, either before or after, but you'll need to soak the pot. So now I put my cutting in. There we go, it's ready. I'm going to soak it, it's ready. Once it's soaked, we'll put it in. Either in this mini greenhouse, it just isn't tall enough, or in a bigger greenhouse, but I'll put it over there. Either here we can use the small bottle as we saw earlier. There you go. In theory it works. At first we leave it closed like this, really, so that the air is saturated with humidity once it has worked. So depending on the plants, it can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, sometimes even 2 months. Once we see that it starts to grow new leaves and we think it's starting to grow roots, we can start to open it little by little. What you also need to remember is that while it's good for it to be saturated with humidity, you still have to remember that the plant breathes inside. So that doesn't stop you from doing it from time to time anyway. Do this every 2-3 days. There you go, you open it, let it breathe, replace the air inside a bit, and then put it back. Because it still needs to stay humid. There are little tricks that let you see if it worked or not. If the leaves fall off, the big leaves, because sometimes they fall off with the tip of the stem, they come off naturally. That's a very good sign. It means the plant is alive. It sensed that this leaf was a bit old and there are new ones coming in. It's getting rid of the old one. If the leaf starts to turn a bit brown, if it falls like this but stays attached to the stem, that's not a very good sign. To see if the plant has grown, to see if there are new leaves or not. Often when you make a lot of cuttings, you don't really remember what stage it was at when you took the cutting. A plant grows so slowly that you don't necessarily notice it's growing. That's when I come back to myself. My earlier trick is that I cut all the plant's leaves in half. So if you come back a few weeks later and you see whole leaves, it's definitely a leaf that grew after the time of cutting. So that can help you see, yes, indeed it started to put out new leaves. So maybe it's time to start opening the greenhouse a little bit. Open the vents on this greenhouse to let it breathe more. Also check the roots underneath. Visible roots are a great sign. That means it's established, growing new leaves and roots, so we can now remove it from the mini greenhouse. It doesn't need to be soaked. Once there are roots, it's fine. However, remember they're still fragile plants at first. If the root system isn't strong enough, sometimes only a single root grows at the bottom. So at first take a little care of them. Gently, sometimes you can take it out of the pot and check if it's well rooted. Take care of it at first, and once it grows well, it's good. So all this technique that I just showed you now, it's valid both for the cutting in water and for the cutting on matured wood. Only the timing will change, so I won't discuss other cutting techniques. This one is already quite good. Now, I'm going to give you another little tip. This is for certain plants that are really difficult. You can use rooting hormones, but be careful, don't go buying chemical hormones from the store. Or even organic hormones. There's no need to go buy that anywhere. Make your own hormones. Find it in the soil or in willow from nature. These are plants that can be propagated incredibly easily, that root really easily. Cut a branch, place it in water, and it grows roots. This plant naturally has what it needs to root easily. We're actually going to take that from it. So take some leaves, willow leaves, take a good handful of leaves, put them in a bucket of water, blended or chopped, however you like, so that the leaves are well soaked in this water. You let it soak for 24 hours, then you filter it, and this water is full of rooting hormones. So either you dip your stem in this water, or what I often do for difficult plants when I do this, it's that here, the pot, before making the cutting, we soak it before putting it in the greenhouse or soak it directly. That way, all the potting soil will be loaded with rooting hormones, and it will make things a bit easier. There you go, it's easy to do and very effective. So another technique that, well, I don't use often, but which is also effective, is called pralinage. So that means we're going to coat the stem with a... If you manage to take root here with everything I'm putting you through, honestly, we'll dip the stem in the slurry, a mix of clay, some garden soil and cow manure. You mix that with water so it has a slightly liquid, creamy consistency. Dip the stem to coat it, then plant it in moist substrate. This keeps a buffer around it, and the hormones in cow dung also help it root more easily. Another thing, if you have plants that tend to rot quite easily, use charcoal powder. Charcoal powder is also antifungal, so it will prevent the development of fungi. Mix some charcoal powder into your potting soil and sprinkle a little on top. There you go, if you keep things clean. Normally you don't need to go that far, but sometimes it can be necessary. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but you're using clean, fresh soil from the bag, not old soil that's been sitting around. We avoid garden soil because it may have fungi or bacteria. Use the cleanest soil you can. And we stack the odds even more in our favor. There you go. Well, I hope that thanks to all this, you'll be able to make beautiful cuttings and that it will work. Don't hesitate if it doesn't work. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I think I'll make another video next time where I'll maybe go into more detail about other types of cuttings. Heel cuttings, micro cuttings, root cuttings and leaf cuttings. I don't have a list of plants that are easier to propagate from semi-hardwood cuttings. Like I said, do it your own way and see what works for you. There you go. In theory, anything can be propagated. Some are more difficult than others, but in theory it works with everything. Well, I hope I didn't forget anything. Thank you for watching up to this point. As usual, if you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you really like it, you can support us on the Typee platform. There you go, and huge thanks to everyone supporting me. I can keep doing this because of you. See you all very soon. Bye.